Anyway, should we start the meeting?
Yeah, well, let me just ask, do you have anything that you'd like to share?
I noticed what you did on a few patches in Self-Medicate, stuff like that. Um,
Oh yeah, closing some of the older PRs and merging them and whatnot.
yeah. Apart from that, and I'm still trying to find out how to properly deploy Eclipse chain and Self-Medicate, obviously on the same platform, same cluster. So that's it. It's basically for me. Nothing new.
Okay, cool. Well, same say, for me, like I said, the uh was what is let me look back actually a week and see what was going on last week. May 5th.
I watched the recording, but I can't remember.
Oh yeah. Okay, so yeah,
Apart from you taking a kind of break, but the rest, yeah, it was about the curriculum and new Git stage and a bit of
yeah.
novelties.
Yeah, the last version of Antidote that I published was minor fixes, and I've been sort of watching production since then just to make sure that it's more stable than 0.6.0 was, and it looks pretty good. So I'll let this bake for a little bit, see what kind of stuff I can gather. More than likely, my next bit of big work will be continuing to improve the contribution pipeline, just because there's still problems with it, or not problems, but I guess things that I would like to continue to optimize. Um, so like the preview service allows you to preview any lessons that you're working on, um, but that's it forces you to you can't use that if you need to contribute an image. Like if your lesson needs a new image, like you got to contribute that first, and that's in the docs. But nevertheless, it's still a slightly not ideal way of doing things. And I'd like to make it so that you can contribute an image as part of that pipeline and get it automatically built. The problem is how to do that in a secure way. So I'm going through the steps of figuring that out. It's just a
Mhm.
bunch of automation that I got to build. So we'll see.
Okay.
But I haven't made any progress on that, and probably won't for at least another week. I've just got some other things I need to take care of. But so yeah, next week or two, I'm probably just in unblocking mode. So like if somebody needs to do something, and I need to provide guidance or some assistance, if I'm able to anyway. Um, then that's kind of what I'll be prioritizing. In terms of working on anything myself, I think I'll be waiting for a few weeks to do that, because I got some other stuff in the work life and the personal life to catch up on. So I'm taking the
Okay.
opportunity to do that.
Mhm. So in between, maybe I hope that my student and me we can make some progress and propose a PR on self-medicate to make it easier to address those ingress configuration issues that we are struggling with.
Yeah, sure. One
And
thing one thing that I may actually do, if you I think so. There's actually a bunch of reasons why I think it would be a good idea to host self-medicate on the native ports. So instead of doing the 30,000, so on and so forth. I
mm,
know you ran into some issues with that. There's also issues with that in terms of routing, routing ingress requests in general. So if you try to load in self-medicate, if you try to load any lessons that have an HTTP presentation, they don't work at all. And the reason for that is, the shoot, I have an issue. I think I have an issue opened on this. Maybe I don't. I can't remember. But anyway, the way that ingresses work, they don't respect ports. Um, like you can't. Okay, yeah, I remember the issue now. Like if you want to route to a particular web app, you
mhm.
have to include port because that's part of it. But the ingress definition won't let you do it. So like Nginx, I believe, will do it. Like it's built into the software of Nginx that you can. But of course, the ingress control, the Nginx ingress controller needs you to pass that via the the ingress definition, and then the Kubernetes API server won't accept port in the route as you define the ingress, and so it's sort of a catch-22. It seems to me as though the underlying load balancer will support it, but the ingress definition won't support it, and so you'll never be able to get that rule in. Which means that the only way that we could possibly fix this is by hosting the ingress controller on a standard port. And the way that you would do that is you would basically tell for the deployment of the ingress controller itself, you would say, hey, use the host network, for this pod basically. At which point, any port that's listed in the deployment, or really in the pod template for that deployment, it would just simply use those ports as long as they're available. If they're not available, then it would break, but it would be the only thing running on those ports. And then of course you would not need a service. You wouldn't need a service at that point because the pod's just listening directly on the host's networks, and there would be no service needed. So you wouldn't do anything with like node ports or anything like that. It would just be that the pod is listening directly on the host network. Anyway, I've been mulling around things to improve the load balancing configuration. Clearly, one of the things that's necessary is that host network. Basically setting host network to true, and then making that the way forward. I think it's a lot easier now that we're standardizing on top of Vagrant. So instead of you can always run self-medicate locally if you're running Linux, but that's not really something that I want to support. I mean, self-medicate in general isn't really something I want to support going forward, but certainly if we do support it, it's in a very constrained sort of like, this is the way that we intend for it to work, and clearly that option is in a Vagrant machine, which makes it a little easier, I think, to say listen on the host network, because we can control that network and say like, this is basically the only service that needs port 80 and port 443 on the Vagrant machine. Anyway, I think a PR to make that change should be pretty straightforward. I could take a stab at it, or if you'd like, I can if you want to do that.
I must say that you kind of lost me in the explanation that you just gave about the topology, because I'm still I mean, I'm not so good at networking.
That's okay.
The base, and then there's the terminology of Kubernetes that is not always obvious to.
Sure. Yeah.
But anyway, we'll try and manage to find a way to, at least to make a tiny contribution, even if that doesn't solve the port 80 on the endpoints on the presentations, but still.
Yeah. I think it would be simpler for a lot of reasons. Anyway, we can continue this conversation.
I think it's interesting to be able to compare how the guys at Eclipse Chair are setting up things and what's in on our platform, because there was already the authentication and the persistent storage and stuff like that, but beyond that, I see some really compatible goals in trying to be able to give a development environment or a testing environment to people. So the two projects are, for me, are very, very much compatible. That could be an interesting alliance somehow if the two could be deployed on the same platform. So
I think you're right. I don't know if you saw, there was a recent announcement last week. I think GitHub had their annual conference where they did yet another web browser based IDE. So clearly it's a common thread that people are pulling on these days.
Yeah. And I think that I don't know about Red Hat, because there is some offering based on coupled to OpenShift, which is something like code spaces or something like that. I don't know. I'm mistaken. So I guess there is also some interest there. So I don't know if you have contacts with them, because Ansible and stuff seem to be some joint
Do you
effort.
So I'm sorry, you said Red Hat has a product for doing like web-based editing,
Yeah,
but it's built on OpenShift.
probably. And I think it may be close to Eclipse Che too, because I think there is some contribution in Eclipse Che from people from that.
Interesting.
So that could be a kind of interesting situation if you had contacts at Red Hat.
I have a
That
few.
could help in this way. I don't know. So I could try and ask people, but I'm not so well connected.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know anything about it. I will, but I'll start poking around.
Anyway, we'll see.
All right. Anything else?
Well, I'm curious about what's the next episode of Labs and Latte.
Well, the current video series is totally caught up with what's published in the curriculum. So probably my next step is to finish the Git lesson. I have one more stage I want to build that takes the. I didn't really get into any practical like here's how you would use Git remotes. I kind of just set the stage for it because there's a lot you got to learn about like setting up authentication and whatnot. So I wanted to make sure that was covered. But in terms, the end game for this lesson, frankly, has always been helping people understand it's not really a deep dive, to be honest. There are plenty of other courses that like go into like crazy detail into like what the anatomy is of the .git directory and all of that. And I didn't want to do any of that. The audience that I have in mind anyway is very practical, and I'm just trying to stick with practical steps. And so the end game for me for this lesson is basically like, okay, so you keep hearing about GitHub and you see that all these projects are on GitHub, and you want to know more about it and maybe how to get involved. Here are the things that you need to do to get to that point. So obviously 90% of that is like the basics of Git, but the end point there is understanding the flow of like opening a pull request or forking a repository, opening a pull request, and then pushing to your fork, and then opening a pull request from there. How do I keep a pull request up to date? So, basically adding two remotes, pulling from the upstream one and then pushing to your fork, things like all of that stuff, all that workflow that is not obvious if you don't have tangible practical experience. That's the last sort of stage I want to build. I don't know if you've looked at it, but that GitHub clone that I'm using in the lesson now is dope. That thing is cool.
Yeah.
It's so small. So I've actually been wanting to build this lesson for a long time, probably since the beginning of the project. The problem was, two problems. One of which was I didn't have HTTP presentations at the beginning of the project. So believe it or not, the Git lesson is one of the reasons I worked on adding HTTP presentations.
Nice.
What I wanted to do was add a GitHub or a GitLab container, which is the only piece of software that I knew of at the time that I could package into the project and into a lesson. And so I kind of always just assumed it was going to be GitLab for a long time. And it sat in a PR, like, dead basically for a year. Cause I was trying to figure out how to get GitLab running. And it took a long time. GitLab is very like heavy handed. It's not a very light piece of software.
Sure.
Anyway, as I was effectively adding all of these additional stages to the Git lesson, I got closer and closer to the end where I was like, okay, I'm going to have to fix this GitLab lesson. And I got to that point. I'm like, let's look around for other things. Maybe there's other projects that I can use that are simpler and lighter weight, that start quickly and things like that. And I came across Git-T, and then Git-T is a hard fork of some other project that I don't remember, but they're similar.
10 years ago, or probably those days, I was very active in the Forges community. I was a maintainer for Fusion Forge, which was a fork of GForge and stuff like that. So,
oh wow,
I've been away for some time, but it's nice that it has evolved, and there are a few opportunities for self-hosting, and
Yeah, yeah,
GitHub is not the only solution, or GitLab is not the only solution, but yeah.
yeah.
And
It's
do you know about Gitolite? Oops.
Git Lite.
Gitolite.
Oh, Gitolite. No.
It's like what you could have used, but without the web interface. So for the initial creation, it would have been command line. It would
Oh,
have
okay.
been something like filling a
Interesting.
form and submitting. But
Interesting.
it's an old project, and it works with public keys anyway. So it helps generating a new key and copying, and all the rest is the same. It's a nice tool. But maybe Git integrates Gitolite somehow.
I don't know. One of the reasons I'm using Git is because it has a very similar UI to GitHub, and
Yeah.
I think most of the people that are looking to learn this are probably going to be using GitHub. They're not super opinionated on what's behind the scenes. They mostly care that they can then reuse that learning to apply themselves, which is probably going to be GitHub.
Nice.
So that was the goal there. Okay, well, anything else this week?
Don't think so. Nobody seems to have joined us.
Yeah, I was looking earlier. Yeah, it seems to be just the two of us. I'll ping those folks that joined not last week but the week before, because we had a flurry of folks join. I'll just ask if they have any questions, if they want to go through anything.
People. Ooh.
Okay. Well, if you come in, if you're in anything else, obviously I'll talk to you on the forums.
See you there.
All right. Stay safe.
You too. Bye.
Bye.